Hey everybody, this is Perch. It's fun, I guess, to speculate about what will happen to Marvel, helping to DC, what a sale would look like, what a spin-out would look like. So here's a viewer question asking, kind of that direct, and let's talk through some scenarios. I want to make it clear these scenarios are purely hypothetical. This is in a typical business, and comics aren't really a typical business, but I'll at least try and go through some of the business factors at play that would cause some of these things to happen. So the question goes, hey, Perch, there's been a lot of speculation that at some point DC will be spun out into another company to handle the publishing wing of the comics. Some have suggested it will be Todd McFarlane. Others think Disney, but I don't see that happening. But let's say Todd McFarlane sealed a run to run DC. Would that be so bad? Todd is a guy who seems to know his stuff, isn't afraid to say what he thinks. If he thinks there's demand for something, then he'll make it. And he doesn't seem like the sort who would make a stupid publishing decision to piss off the right people or dunk on chuds. Would a McFarlane DC be so bad? Okay, so first let me just hit the obvious one. So DC getting spun into to Disney. So that's a flat no. The logistics of that happening would require a huge outlay from Disney because the problem is the rights. So it's actually not so much about the comics, but even if the publishing rights alone went to Disney, the deal would be structured so bad one way or another that it would never happen. What I mean by that is, in order for it to be workable for Warner Media and Discovery, basically Disney would have to agree that we'll publish all the comics but divorce themselves from any rights of the IP generated from those comics. Disney would never do that deal. It would be a terrible deal for them. It doesn't fit with their corporate strategy. It would be off. And plus, those comics would never get any love whatsoever because Disney would be buying it purely for the comic division. And they're not even running Marvel purely for the comic division, the one they have. So if they don't have any rights to do other things with the IP, look, screw it. They're not going to do that. Or the deal would be slanted in the other direction, meaning Warner could do a deal where Disney gets all the rights, like a right of first refusal to do all films. But that would basically take away any point to having it at all from Warner Media. They would get like a small payout, and in that world, you'd start talking about collusion, and like it would get into a messy situation. There's just no way the financials work out in that world. So that's the rub. That's why a deal there is impossible. The way it could work is if Disney forked over billions of dollars, because they would have to buy the IP rights and the film rights and everything. It wouldn't just be the comics. It'd be making a deal for all of it. And Disney, it would be questionable if Disney would do that. They would still face some scrutiny, although I don't know that a monopoly in the superhero world would get a lot of interest from the federal government. I don't know. I highly doubt it. But anyway, that's where it would sit. The problem is Disney doesn't have the cash to do that right now. They're over leveraged by a lot of things they have. COVID hit them hard. There's a lot of reasons why, that's not going to happen either. So they're just kind of in a messy situation where there isn't a workable deal to be had. So then we go to the other one. So, okay, so what about McFarlane? So McFarlane has a few of the same problems, but it is a more workable deal. So you asked, would a McFarlane DC be so bad? The short answer is probably not. Where it would be bad has nothing to do with McFarlane. It would be McFarlane suddenly running a large-scale business. Because let's say Todd, say he took over the publishing, but he's like, I'm not going to publish all this stupid crap. I'm only going to publish, what will sell. And in that world, maybe he cuts the comic line down to 18 to 20. I mean, he could do that. But Todd McFarlane also doesn't have the logistical operation to do that. Doesn't mean he can't build it, and he could. But Todd's strength comes from the business he's created and the business he's built. If he was to take over publishing, that deal would likely come with a lot of the employees at DC that are currently there, and Todd would either have to take ownership of them or figure out a home for them. Or I mean, it would introduce a bunch of chaos that I don't think Todd would want to deal with. Is a problem. And I think that, would Todd's business be the same if suddenly he went to, from printing 4 titles today to suddenly, at best case scenario, even if he said, I'm radically going to slim down the line, he'd still be probably putting out at least 20 to 25 comics a month. So you're talking about a 5x jump in what he produces. And again, I think he's a smart guy. Not to say he couldn't do it, but why would he do it? I mean, it would have to come with a lot of belief that he could turn that part of the publishing business something great. And Todd might believe that, and he might be right. I think from a pure talent perspective, yeah, I think he's shown an aptitude to kind of listen to fans, figure things out, and I think on that front, creatively, I think it'd be fine. But the business is certainly more than just creative. There's these other elements to it, and I think the other elements, they just get sticky very very quickly. So I don't know. I think it would be creatively. I'd be curious to see it. They could always strike a deal similar to how the what they did with the Image guys. Sorry, no, not the Image. With Rob and Jim Lee back when they took over the Marvel line. I think that they could always do something like that. And then Todd's actually not taking over the editing and kind of a lot of those logistical pieces. Todd's just focusing on publishing the comics and staffing them and doing that kind of work. So it'd be like the editors at DC they'd be able to radically slim down that operation, and the editors are more like just I don't know, controllers, for lack of a better word. They'd ingest and publish kind of what was being handed to them. And I think that scenario might be good. That might be good for Todd and might be good for DC. But again, I kind of go back to what's in it for Todd. So DC would have to put some serious money and stake on the table. I don't know if they would do that. Now, in fairness, if you're Zaslav and you're thinking about a good way to kind of manage your business better going forward, handing a lot of that logistical stuff out to Todd McFarlane and saying, look, we're going to have a relatively skeleton staff of people who are going to turn over the comics and do that work here. And, you worry about the creative and dealing with all those people that are just annoying to me. And you make the comics kind of as you see fit, and then we'll turn them around. That's probably a good financial deal for Zaslav. And I think they could, if you don't inherently care too much about the comic business, which by all accounts, I don't think he does, then he'd be probably willing to give Todd a pretty good stake in the business, or pretty good margin, pretty good cut. And so you could make it attractive to Todd in that scenario. And as Zaslav was like, I really just see the comics as good marketing, consistent kind of auxiliary money that helps with the licensing and that kind of thing. And I don't care about the actual comics themselves. I just want this business to kind of operate. Okay, that could be interesting. And but a lot of things would kind of have to fall into place for that to happen. But there is a deal to be made there. Obviously, McFarlane's doing the toys right now, so it is an existing relationship. And but it would take if you're Zaslav, you would look at that. And this is the problem with a lot of these rumors about Zaslav wanting to get in and really reorganize and orchestrate DC Comics. The challenge with that entire argument is that you have to believe that he cares enough about the business to invest his time there. And even though this will may drive a bunch of comic people insane, is it worth it for him to do this? If you think about all the places, you've got a limited amount of hours in the day to kind of write a business and put it together. He's going to be thinking about cutting costs and combining the two streaming platforms, figuring out a better method to get movies out at an effective rate, putting new licensing deals together about where the movies are going to go once they're made. Those kinds of decisions are $100 million decisions, more, potentially $1 billion decisions. It is not feasible that he's going to invest heavy amounts of his mental energy and time trying to work out a deal with Todd or somebody like that for his comic division, where at most he saves, I don't know, $8 million a year. If he was to go to his board and say, all right, in my first year I saved $8 million over at DC and I restructured the licensing deal and I got the books in the hands of a well-known, well-respected comic creator, Todd McFarlane. So this is what I've done in this first quarter. The board and the people backing him are going to be like, you're fired. Todd who? That'd be the response. They're looking for him to come in and make 100, 200, $400 million decisions out the gate. And that is what he appears to be doing. So um, this is something that would get handed out to a lesser person. I don't know. We'll see. It's conceivable though. There is, like I said, there's a deal that you could strike there. You could also do the same deal with somebody like Mark Miller. There's a couple individuals out there who might want to curate, a line and do something like that. So there is a path. It's just not a clean path. And to incent everyone to get involved, that's where it gets really tricky. There's not a lot of great meat on the table to really make this appealing to a lot of people. Either appealing, to make a good deal, it has to be appealing to both parties. And there's worlds where it's appealing to DC or the new DC ownership of Zaslav, and there's deals where it's appealing to a Todd or somebody like that. But getting both at once, that's a harder proposition, and I think not unworkable. Never say never, but it's unlikely. The most likely scenario is the one that nobody really loves contemplating, which is it's going to be exactly like it is now for another 5 years, and buckle up. So anyway, it's funny because comics in general and will they go away feels like a similar argument to people who say, we won't have actual physical books anymore because iPads and digital and people don't read books and books will be extinct. Well, yeah, at some point books will be extinct. That is true. But I think people overestimate the speed at which that happens because there are just a lot of factors in there where it's not straightforward. So anyway, thank you very much for the question. Appreciate you letting me play armchair business analyst, assessor. I don't know. It's fun. It is like anything in business. The thing you learn when you do business like this and when you kind of really vet out these scenarios is there's always a likely there's the likely scenario always in play of anything can happen. And so when you assess risk, you never assess it in a it's got to be this way kind of scenario, because half the time it can be anything. I mean, anything can happen in business, and only a fool goes, well, it's definitely going to occur this way. That's not true. There's a lot of different outcomes. Your best guess is to basically assess the odds, not the binary likelihood. Anyway, thanks for the question, and curious to get everybody's take on this. Thanks for listening.